Thank you for joining me here at 420 Colts Lane. I am your host, Nathan Lowry. Today I want to discuss my predictions for the NFC West. Let's talk some football. I'm going to start off with my fourth place team. I'm going to pick the Arizona Cardinals. This is probably not a big surprise to many. Last year they went 3-13. They had 2,523 passing yards with 15 passing touchdowns and 18 interceptions. That is not good at all. They allowed 3,262 passing yards with only getting 7 interceptions. I believe that's the lowest amount I've seen since I've been doing this. It's a very low amount. 21 passing touchdowns allowed. They ran for 1,342 yards. Not very good. And 9 touchdowns. Also not very good. They allowed 2,479 rushing yards and 25 touchdowns. None of this is good. They did get 49 sacks, and I'll have to say that that's actually pretty decent, and I was surprised that they got that many sacks. But they also allowed 52. So really they lost every single battle that you could possibly lose by a pretty wide margin on most, except for the sacks was fairly close. But yeah, not a very good performance out of these Arizona Cardinals, who had the first overall pick. They were the worst team in the league, and you can see why. Let's go ahead and get into this draft. We have number 1 overall, Kyler Murray, quarterback from Oklahoma. I actually used to live in Oklahoma. I spent about a year and a half there. I do keep up with Oklahoma a little bit. Kyler Murray is a very good quarterback. He had some very good stats. He is one of these college quarterbacks that was able to get out of the pocket, was very athletic, made all kinds of ridiculous looking plays, and really made them look easy. He is a scrambling quarterback, but he throws the ball. He's a very accurate thrower. Really, all around, his game is pretty darn solid, at least at the collegiate level. We'll see how that translates into the pros. This was under a lot of debate. They ended up having the first overall pick last year, and they got Josh Rosen. Then they turn around and do this again and get Kyler Murray. They obviously traded Josh Rosen to the Dolphins. We'll discuss that a little bit more. Kyler Murray does seem to be a better fit for what they're doing. They got a new coach with a new scheme and a new system. A lot of people, it was controversial. A lot of people hated this pick. I didn't hate this pick. I think it was a solid pick. I actually think Rosen's probably going to be better at the Dolphins. Again, we'll discuss a little bit more of that. But I do think Kyler Murray is a better fit for their system. He is a small guy. He's only, I want to say he's 5'9". I think he measured higher than people were saying. At any rate, he's a little bit of a smaller guy. You could look at him and think that he's smaller. I'm not quite sure how this is going to translate into the pros. A lot of people are sold on this guy. Again, last year Baker Mayfield was in this situation. People said he's a little too small. He showed that he could play at that level. I like Baker Mayfield. We'll see what Kyler Murray does. It's going to be interesting to watch, but I'm not as sold on Kyler Murray as a lot of people are. I do think he has a lot of good skill set, but we'll see how it all plays out. Number 33, we've got Brian Murphy, cornerback, Washington. He's definitely needed to be a coverage. I guess he's a little bit of a decent coverage cornerback. Reading up on him, they need as much coverage help as they can get. They really do. They have Patrick Peterson, who's a very good cornerback, although he is facing a 6-game suspension because of PEDs. That's going to hurt their team a lot. Again, they only had 7 interceptions last year. This was a very, very poor performance from their secondary. They need safeties. They need corners. They need defensive backs in the worst way. And again, Patrick Peterson is really good. I was surprised that they only had 7 because Patrick Peterson plays for them. I imagine they just didn't have a lot of depth in the other positions. They didn't have very good players. So it was really simple. You go into a game, you let Patrick Peterson, you don't even throw the ball to him. There's been a lot of cornerbacks in the league that were really good that have had this happen to them. They don't get the ball thrown their way, and maybe that's what happened last year. He didn't get any opportunities because it was able to plan against that and let him just go ahead and run all over the field and never get targeted. With that said, very poor performance. They needed to go cornerback. This is a smart move because it definitely addresses a need that they have. At 33 overall, Byron Murphy is supposed to be a good cornerback. He was a highly touted cornerback. I believe that there were some better ones out there that went earlier than him, but this is a good pick. I'd be happy with this pick if I was an Arizona Cardinal fan. Which, by the way, I did spend 7 years in Phoenix, Arizona. And one of the years I was there was the year that they went to the Super Bowl. I do kind of pull for the Cardinals, though it's really hard to do so because they have historically been a pretty bad team. But I do like to see them succeed, so I just wanted to get that out there. Andy Isabella, wide receiver from Massachusetts. Again, they only had 15 touchdowns, and I know that Rosen didn't play up to his potential last year. It's going to be a different quarterback this year. They need to get weapons to set up for Kyler Murray, and I believe that their offensive line was absolutely atrocious. I mean, they gave up 52 sacks, only 1,342 rushing yards that they allowed, they gained, 2,523 passing yards. So their offensive line was not very good at all. I want to say that them and the Dolphins are known for the worst lines in football last year. Good for Josh Rosen to be able to play for one team and then go to another bad team. But we'll see how it all plays out. Again, adding wide receiver gives him some targets here. I think Andy Isabella is a good wide receiver. He's a little bit he's good, but not. I think that they needed kind of a bigger back, bigger wide receiver. You'll see later on in the draft we do this. They do this, but they have Larry Fitzgerald, who is getting old, and he is a very good wide receiver. He's always been a very good wide receiver, very consistent play, probably the most recognizable and best person on their team. Patrick Peterson's good also as well, but Larry Fitzgerald is always the gold standard there in Arizona. He is the best player that they've got. So it's hard when you're the only wide receiver on a team that they're going to double team you, they're going to coverage you. So they're going to go ahead and add some weapons here. Andy Isabella, I don't know if he was the greatest fit for what they needed, but I do believe he is a good wide receiver, and anytime you're a good wide receiver, you're a pretty good fit for a team. That's my opinion. I like wide receivers a lot. Zach Allen, he's a defensive end at 65. We've got that was number 62, by the way. Andy Isabella. Number 65, you've got Zach Allen. He's a defensive end from Boston College. They did get sacks, but they need to bolster this defensive line. So picking this defensive end here at 65 was a good fit. I like him. I think he's going to be a good player. At least he looks like he's going to be a good player. And at 65, I think it's a great pick here. 103, Hakeem Butler, wide receiver, Iowa State. He's definitely a bigger wide receiver. I think this is a great pick for what they need. They need that guy in the end zone. They struggled with 15 touchdowns. They need somebody in the end zone that can go up and compete. I do believe here at 103, Hakeem Butler is a good pickup. He is. I wouldn't have minded seeing the Colts get him as a wide receiver. He was somebody that was on my radar. So I do like this kid, and I think that he's got a lot of raw talent. Like I said, it comes from Iowa State. So I think that in the long run, he could definitely be a good addition to this team. Again, I like what they did with picking the 2 wide receivers, although I've noticed that they're here in the top picks, there was no lineman selected. Possibly they just didn't see one that they liked that was on their board that fit what they wanted to do. I feel like it was a missed opportunity in the draft so far to not pick up a lineman here at the top of the draft. They had a terrible line, and I don't like that. though, I do like the additions of the wide receivers. You got to give this young quarterback a reason to play, and one of the big reasons that they picked him, in my opinion, was that he can scramble, he can get out of the pocket, he can make plays. Rosen could not do that. He got sacked a lot. 52 sacks on him. He's not very mobile, so if you don't have a very good offensive line, you got to get a quarterback that can make plays happen. And I think that as long as he can stay healthy, this guy can do that. So adding these wide receivers is a good option to try to get him out of the line. If you're not going to add linemen, I guess adding wide receivers and giving them targets is a good way to go. At 115, we've got Deontay Thompson, safety from Alabama. Again, they need to bolster this defensive back core, so I'm going to think that that's a good choice no matter what. That they definitely need DBs. They got the cornerback high up, so next they've got Keyshawn Johnson at 174. He's a wide receiver out of Fresno State. I don't know much about him, but they did say that he could play slot or play outside. I think he's a little bit of a smaller receiver. Again, adding receivers, so we'll have to see how that all plays out. Obviously, they're looking to add weapons for this new quarterback, and they want to see what he can do. I think it's going to be fun to watch him, and I think in the future it's going to definitely be funner. We'll see how it all plays out. 179, you've got Lamont Gilliard. He's a center out of Georgia. This is their first offensive lineman that they've taken at 179. Like I said, I don't like that. I wish that they would have went a little higher up to get a lineman. Again, we don't know how their draft board looks, who they wanted, what fit what they wanted, and if they didn't see anything that they needed, and they felt like they needed these other positions more. But I really wish that they would have definitely, bolstered that offensive line. It's kind of hard to have confidence when you're that bad at offensive line. Maybe that's what they look for in the future. I know the Colts have gone that route before, made some decisions to bolster offense or bolster defense and not help out a line that desperately needed it. In the long run, we made some good decisions and were able to bolster our line, so maybe that's what they're doing, just waiting until next year to address that offensive line. I could definitely see that. Here we have at 248, Joshua Miles. Again, 248, very low in the draft. Again, offensive tackle. So now they're starting to pick linemen. From Morgan State. Here from Morgan State, this is a smaller school. Perhaps they're finding a diamond in the rough, that gem that you went out and got late in the draft that people didn't notice because it was a smaller school. We'll have to see how that plays out. My guess is he's probably just depth chart fodder and is probably not going to be a starter or add much, at least starting out. Michael Dugby, defensive end from Temple at 249. Again, going with a defensive end here. 254, Caleb Wilson, tight end out of UCLA. Very low in the draft. Can't be very good. Can't be very high up there. But they obviously need to add targets here. I don't know what their tight end core looks like, their starting tight ends. It was hard for me to keep up with Arizona last year, probably because they were so bad. I never really wanted to watch them play, and that's shame on me for not following them a little better. So I don't know what their tight end core is like, but here at 254, I doubt you're getting a starter anyway, so it's probably just depth. All right, now let's go on to free agency. They added Jordan Hicks, inside linebacker from Philadelphia. I think this was good. They need defensive players. They need people that can cover there. Inside linebackers, what they got. He's a good player. He's a solid player. So I do like that. They got Robert Alford, cornerback from Atlanta. Somebody commented on my predictions for the NFC South and saying that I didn't know much about Atlanta. And I think that they're absolutely right. Atlanta, I think, is a little bit of a boring team, so I wish I knew more about Robert Alford. It seemed from his salary that he probably is a pretty decent player. Outside of that, I don't know much about him. I don't know why. Atlanta's kind of like the Giants is another team that I don't watch, though they are pretty bad, so it's easy to know that they're bad. I don't know why it is Atlanta. I just can't watch them. I don't know why. So I don't know much about Atlanta. I just wanted to acknowledge that. All right. We've got Darius Philon. Darius Philon, defensive tackle from the LA Chargers. I again don't know much about him, but He played for the Chargers, who was a really good team, so I imagine he's probably a decent player. I don't know. We got Terrell Suggs, outside linebacker from Baltimore. I love Terrell Suggs. I love his game. He's a he's kind of a mean guy. He's very tough, very tough. He is a much older guy, and I know he's from Arizona. So here to finish up his career, because he can't be playing for too much longer, I doubt. Maybe he'll surprise us. I know that his gameplay has definitely suffered here lately. He's still a solid player, but he's definitely not the standout that he once was for Baltimore. Maybe going into this warmer climate environment, I know that people older in age definitely can succeed and like playing in Arizona because it's easy on their joints, it's easy on that. You get this dry climate weather, and so this is where he's from. I'm sure that's going to interject a little bit of energy into him. I can't imagine it not. So I like the Terrell Suggs pickup. I think that's a decent pickup. Plus, you've got all kinds of experience there in the veteran presence. He can bring leadership to your team. I do like this pickup. Okay, J.R. Sweezy. He's a guard from Seattle. Max Garcia, guard from Denver. So here they are bolstering with free agency for the offensive linemen as opposed to going with the draft. And honestly, I don't think that's a bad decision to have when your line is that bad. You want to bring in some free agents to kind of bolster some experience there, where you don't have to. It's not going to be a couple years to teach them up. These guys already know what they're doing. They might not be the best guards in the league, but for the team the way that it was, I don't think this is bad. And then you've got Charles Clay, tight end from Buffalo. Is again adding a tight end here. Brett Hundley, a quarterback for Seattle. Obviously, he's backup material. Brooks Reed, defensive end from Atlanta. Kevin White, wide receiver out of Chicago, adding another wide receiver. This guy was once considered a really, really good wide receiver. I don't think he ever lived up to that. I was really looking forward to seeing him play with Chicago. But again, I don't think Kevin White ever really lived up to the hype that was about him. I'm sure that there is some potential still there. This is going to be a depth chart guy with all of the wide receivers that they drafted and whatnot. It'll be interesting to see who ends up becoming in their starters and who doesn't. But again, adding targets for this young quarterback to throw at. Terrell McClain, defensive tackle out of Atlanta. Again, don't know much about Atlanta. I need to watch more Atlanta. I need to do that this year. I know that they're a good team, and I'm not trying to hate on them. They're boring. I think Matt Ryan's boring. All right. Josh Shaw, free safety from Tampa Bay. Again, adding depth to that defensive back positions, which they desperately need. Max Williams, tight end out of Baltimore. Demir Bird, wide receiver out of Carolina. Again, adding another wide receiver. So they obviously needed to address them. All right, now here's the key losses for them. They got Antoine Bethea, who used to play for the Colts. He's a free safety. He went to the Giants. I like Bethea, but I got to be honest, he is definitely old. Obviously, I don't think he played very well for them last year. Their defensive backing core was just terrible. He probably had some injuries throughout the time because, again, and I know that he had some injuries for the Colts, so this is a guy that doesn't stay healthy and play all of the games, not usually. So I don't think it's a terrible loss because, again, you got to bring some youth into this team. They're building around this young quarterback. You got to bring some younger players in here. So Marcus Golden, defensive end, went to the Giants. Mike Lillipati, Iupati, that's how you say his name. I don't remember. But he's a guard. He went to Seattle. I actually didn't think that this guy was that bad of a player. So I don't know, maybe he just was fed up with the team and wanted to go. But he was probably, to me, something that they probably will feel a little bit of a loss on, though they did go out and get guards to replace him. So we'll have to see how that goes. Deion Buchanan, inside linebacker, went to Tampa Bay. Mike Glennon, the backup quarterback, went to Oakland. I'm sure they're going to feel a loss on that. Probably not. And then obviously they traded Josh Rosen to the Dolphins. Again, I think they kind of gave up on this kid a little bit early, except for the fact that I do believe that he doesn't fit their system. I think that they were the coach that they had before maybe was trying to do things a little bit different, but this guy's not mobile, and when you have a terrible offensive line, you can't have a guy like this playing for you and have success. I actually think probably for Josh Rosen, though he did go to another bad team with another bad offensive line, I think that he fits more the style of play that the Dolphins are looking for. So I think it probably in the end will be a good situation for both quarterbacks. I know it was heavily criticized, this decision to bring a quarterback in and then just get rid of him the following year, with the first overall pick, and then get rid of him the following year and then bring another quarterback in. A lot of teams don't do that. The Cleveland Browns, I think, have done that, maybe. It's not common. It's really not. And you have to be an exceptional player to get that. I do think Kyle Murray stands out in that way. It'll be interesting to see how long he lasts. But I don't hate the decision. Again, I feel kind of bad for Josh Rosen in the situation that he was in, because I think he seems like a nice guy. But this is football. It's not about being a nice guy. It's about what you can deliver on the field. I don't think his lack of success necessarily had to do with him. I think he does have some very good upside, and he probably will play better for the Dolphins. But I think that they just didn't have a very good team around him, and he wasn't built for what they were going to do anyhow, and he wasn't built for the new coach. So with that said, we'll have to see how the Arizona Cardinals do next year. I don't think that they're going to be all that successful. I just don't. Sure, maybe in the future they will, but I think that they're still going to be bottom of the pack. Until you address that offensive line, I don't think that they're really going to have a lot of success. Until you get that DB situation taken care of, you're not going to have a lot of success. This is a team that's being built right now, I think, for the future. It seems like Arizona is always being built for the future, with the exceptions of the few years that they had with Kurt Warner and that regime kind of thing. But it'll be interesting to see how it all goes. So yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see in the future how this plays out. Right now, I still think they're a bottom of the pack team. Sorry, Cardinals fans. I am rooting for you guys. I would like to see you do a little better. I just don't see it this year. So that's why I have them in fourth place here. Now, with that said, we've got third place, which is the 49ers, San Francisco 49ers. Last year, they were 4-12. They had 3,867 passing yards with 26 touchdowns and 20 interceptions. I do know that it was Nick Mullins, I believe is his name, was the backup quarterback. Their starting quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo, got injured right away when the season started. They brought in this rookie that wasn't quite ready to play, I don't believe. 20 interceptions is pretty high. I've seen a couple games where he actually did play pretty well, and he showed flashes that he could be a good quarterback. Then there was other games where he showed he wasn't ready to play. They obviously have George Kittle, the star tight end, but I don't think that they have all that much in the wide receiving game. We'll have to see how that goes. 3,867 passing yards, 26 touchdowns, 20 interceptions, not good. We'll see if Garoppolo can come back and do this. 3,732 yards allowed, with just 2 interceptions. Okay, I take it back about San Francisco being the worst defensive backs that I've seen. That's right. 2 interceptions. That's right. 35 touchdowns allowed. 2 interceptions. That's all they got the entire year. How do you even do? How does that even work? How does that even happen? I don't even understand that. I almost want to go check and fact check and make sure that I wrote that down wrong, because that number is that bad. But I'm pretty sure that I did write it down right. 1,902 rushing yards, which is not bad at all, with 7 touchdowns. That's not very good. If you got that many rushing yards, you should be able to get in the end zone. Obviously, they struggled in that area. 1,814 yards allowed, 13 touchdowns allowed. The touchdowns not terrible, not great either, but 1,814 is a pretty good amount. This team had 37 sacks and 48 allowed. So obviously they lost quite a few of these battles. Again, people talk about how Jimmy Garoppolo wasn't playing. He got injured right away. They had this backup quarterback, and that's a big reason for the lack of success offensively. I got to be honest with you, I'm not really as sold on Jimmy Garoppolo as some people are. When I hear Jimmy Garoppolo, here's what I see. I see a quarterback that came out of New England, like other quarterbacks who have come out of New England and sold people that they were going to be good because he played in a very solid system with a very solid coach who knows exactly what he's doing. This is some of the criticism I've had about Tom Brady, but we won't get into that right now. I do believe Tom Brady's a great quarterback, not taking anything away from him. But this team has the ability to take these backup quarterbacks and sell them to other teams as good quarterbacks, and oftentimes they're not. Could Jimmy Garoppolo be a good quarterback? Sure, but I just don't. I mean, we haven't seen anything from him yet. We haven't seen anything to show that, yes, he is worth the kind of money that they're paying for him or the hype that's around him. So it's kind of hard to be sold on. At any rate, in the draft, here's what they did. They went and got, at number 2 overall, Nick Bosa, defensive end, Ohio State. This is widely considered the best player in the draft. Yes, Kyler Murray got picked number 1 overall, but Nick Bosa is considered to be the best pick in the draft, and I do believe that he is an extremely talented guy who wreaked havoc at Ohio State. There's no way this isn't a good selection. I just don't think that that's possible. So, I mean, San Francisco's going to be excited. They got a great tight end, and now they have a great defensive end. I'm not sure what else they have that's great, but they do have those two things. Then he went and got Deebo Samuel, number 36 overall. He's a wide receiver out of South Carolina. This is going to be a great wide receiver as well. I think that they definitely bolstered just with him alone. They definitely, this was a good selection and is going to give, no matter who the quarterback is, and obviously I'm pretty sure it's going to be Garoppolo. Obviously they pay him that much money, it's going to be Garoppolo if he can stay healthy. But yeah, I think this was a great target to add. Then at 67, they went and got Jalen Hurd, wide receiver out of Baylor. Jalen Hurd is somebody that I would have liked to see the Colts select because I like big wide receivers. He's 6'5", 226. So obviously they went and got the defensive end first, and then they added 2 wide receivers. They obviously needed to address that wide receiving core. To add pieces that could take away from George Kittle, that you can't just go ahead and double team, which he played very well regardless. This is good. I think San Francisco definitely did a good moves here in the first 3 for sure. And then we go with 110th overall, Mitch Wishnowsky, punter out of Utah. Was this a good selection? You wish. Now, ski. Yeah, they went with a punter here. From what I understand, he's the best punter coming out of college from Utah. Apparently, he was really good punter. Did they need to take him this high though? Whatever. I don't know. I don't like this. I never like taking kickers and punters this high in the draft. I think that they probably could have waited a little bit, but obviously this was a need that they needed. They wanted the best guy out there, so they made a wish, and that wish was granted now. Ski. Didn't work either time. Okay, and then we're going to go with 148 overall, D. Greenlaw, linebacker, Arkansas. Caden Smith, 176. He's a tight end out of Stanford. This is a blocking tight end, and I think that's smart. I like when teams do that. They've got this receiving tight end who's very good in George Kittle. So adding a blocking tight end that they can use in those kind of schemes, run schemes, and adding on the line, I don't have a problem with that at all. 176. We'll just have to see how good he is. Coming out of Stanford, I like Stanford players, so. I mean, I would say so far I have liked what they've done, with the exception of the punter. I have liked what they've done in the draft. 183, you've got Justin Skull. He's an offensive tackle from Vanderbilt. 198, Tim Harris, cornerback from Virginia. I think it might be a little too late for this position to take. I kind of think that they should have addressed this higher up. Again, 2 interceptions the whole entire year. You should have been there was all kinds of really good cornerbacks and safeties in this draft, like all kinds of them. It really was a high-end draft for those positions. It's crazy that they waited till 198 with that kind of performance out of their defensive backs. I get bolstering the wide receiving core. To take a punter at 110 when your defensive back core was this bad, just don't see that as a smart decision. So, got to knock him a little bit for that. Free agency. Quan Alexander, inside linebacker from Tampa Bay. This is a good selection. I like him. He's a good player. And, I think he's going to bring something to their defense for sure. Then they got Tevin Coleman, running back out of Atlanta. This might be the only person from Atlanta I do pay attention to. I did pay attention to. I like Tevin Coleman. I think he's a good running back. I want to say that he had some injury concerns, so I think he got injured. He was doing really well, and then he got injured. This is a good running back to add to their team, I believe. They had 1,902 rushing yards, so their backs wasn't that bad anyways, but they need to get in the end zone. I think Coleman gives them that option. He is definitely more of a downhill runner, and he can run over people. So I like Coleman. I think that this is a good selection for them. All right, then you've got Mark Ziodana, outside linebacker, is a re-sign. Jimmy Ward, free safety, re-sign. Jason Verrett, cornerback out of the Chargers. This is good. I like this because this is veteran presence that they're adding in those defensive backs, which they obviously did not add in the draft. They didn't go after. So here we go in free agency. I think that's not bad. Jordan Matthews, wide receiver out of Philadelphia. I like the wide receivers that they picked in the draft better than him. It'll be interesting to see where he is in that. Antoine Exum, I think that's how you say it. Free safety is a re-sign. So they did re-sign 2 free safeties. They must have thought that they were pretty decent. Ben Garlord, guard out of Atlanta. Here's another play to Atlanta. I don't pay attention to offensive linemen anyway, so I don't know anything about it. Their key losses. Bradley Pinion, punter from Tampa Bay, which is why they needed to replace that with a good punter. And then Cassius Marsh, outside linebacker from Seattle. Or to Seattle. I'm sorry, to Seattle. I don't know. I kind of was up and down with what they did in the free agency. To be honest with you, I think that I like their free agency a little bit better than the Arizona Cardinals did. I think that the 49ers are better than their 4-12 record indicate, especially if Jimmy Garoppolo can play well at a high level, which, again, I don't know if he can or not. I'm very skeptical, if I'm being honest with you, because it seems like these backup quarterbacks are just fool's gold that come out of the Patriots. They sell people on them, and they're just really not all that great. And so I'm not as sold on him as some people are. But with George Kittle at tight end, now adding Nick Bosa, adding Deebo Samuel, Jalen Hurd, I do think that this team got better, and I think that they'll be better than their record indicates. I'm not sure that they're. I mean, the next 2 teams are tough teams. These are very good teams. So, do I think the 49ers have closed the gap a little bit? Sure. Are they inching on anybody? No, I don't believe so. I think this is where they are in 3rd place. And really, to be honest with you, I think that the Cardinals maybe could overtake them, though I think that's a very, very long shot that could happen this year at least. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I do believe that the 49ers are better than their 4-12 record indicated. All right, now I'm going to have to go 2nd overall in this division. This might be a little controversial. I think I'm going to mix things up a little bit. I'm actually going to take the Rams here at 3rd place. Now, people are probably going to think I'm crazy. They went 13-3, and obviously we're a really good team last year. People are probably, like I said, gonna hate that I picked them here. But there's parity in the league. It happens all the time. And for some reason, I just have this gut feeling that this is going to be one of those things that the team takes a major step back. So let's get into what they did last year. This is 4,507 passing yards. Really good. 32 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. You can't complain about that at all. Very good play. They gave up 3,780 yards with 18. They took 18 interceptions, which is really good. 31 touchdowns. So their defense obviously played pretty decent against the pass. 18 interceptions. That's good. Better than 2. That's definitely better than 2. 2,223 rushing yards with 23 touchdowns. This is what they excelled at. They obviously have Todd Gurley, who unfortunately has some injury issues at this point. But man, just played out of his mind last year. This is great rushing stats. This is such a good rushing team. And obviously, when you match that up with 4,507 passing yards, you see why they were such a good team. 1,957 yards allowed and 12 touchdowns. That's not spectacular. It's kind of a lot of yardage to add. So I think defensively there are some holes there. Offensively, I think that they played out of their mind last year. And 41 sacks, 33 allowed. People talked about their defense, about how good their defense was. You've got Aaron Donald, who's absolutely a beast at defensive tackle. But obviously, there's definitely some holes in there. It was kind of like, I mean, I think it's very comparison to Kansas City a little bit, where, like, there are some holes in that defense, even though it's a very good team offensively. In the draft, they've got 61 overall, which is, pretty late to have your first pick. They got Taylor Rapp. He's a defensive back from Washington. And I honestly don't know much about him. 70 overall. Darrell Henderson, running back out of Memphis. I used to live in Memphis, so I do follow them a little bit. But it wasn't hard to figure out who this guy was. Darrell Henderson, I think, is going to be a good running back. I mean, it's going to be hard. It's hard to evaluate players that play for Memphis because they're in a weak division there in college. And so when somebody dominates, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to come in the league and dominate in the NFL. But he did dominate. He did. He had some really good statistics, and he was a really good back. And we'll have to see. At one point, he was considered, I think, the top running back coming out of college, though. That kind of faltered a little bit his senior year. I think somebody was saying his junior year, if he would have come out, he would have been considered like one of the top running backs. Regardless, I think he's a really good running back, and I think this is a good pick here at 70. There are questions with Todd Gurley whether he'll ever be back to form, or at least this year is he going to be back to form. I can't remember what exactly his injury is, but I think it's pretty serious, and they were saying that it could have long-term effects. Darrell Henderson is probably a good person to pick as a backup, change of pace back. I think long-term they're going to be very happy with this selection. David Long, cornerback from Michigan. I think this is also at number 79. Also, this is a long term. He might not step in right away and play. But I think long term at cornerback, this is a good selection as well. Bobby Evans, offensive tackle from Oklahoma. Adding on to that line. Greg Gaines, defensive lineman from Washington. They lost Ndamukong Suh, so this is somebody that they're going to need to bolster that position. Kind of fell in there. At 169, we've got David Edwards. He's an offensive tackle out of Wisconsin. 243, we've got Nick Scott, safety out of Penn State. 241, we've got Dakota Allen, linebacker out of Texas Tech. I guess he had some trouble. He kind of redeemed himself. He got in some trouble, and I think what happened was he ended up having to play for a smaller school and then ended up coming back to Texas Tech. I can't remember exactly what the trouble was that he had, but there was some character issues involved. So this is probably why he slipped a little bit. People were saying that this could be a very good value pick here at 251, and that eventually he could turn into a pretty good player. So this might be about his character, which people seem to have indicated that he's kind of come a long way and changed it around. We'll have to see how that plays out. Free agency. They brought in Eric Weddle, free safety from Baltimore, who has been Eric Weddle. He's been a very good player, but he's a little bit old. And they also brought in Clay Matthews, outside linebacker from Green Bay. Also, very good player, but he's pretty old. They brought in Blake Bortles as a backup quarterback. As a backup, I'm sure Blake Bortles is a fine backup. He make a fine backup. As a starter, not so much. Their key losses, and this is where I think they take a step back. They lost Roger Saffold, guard from Tennessee, to Tennessee. He went to Tennessee, and I think he was a really good guard. From what like I said, I don't know a lot about linemen but I do believe that this guy was a good guard, good lineman. They lost LaMarcus Joyner, free safety. He went to Oakland. I think that they're going to fill that as well. Mark Barron, inside linebacker. He went to Pitt. Again, I think that they're going to feel that a little bit. And Ndamukong Suh, defensive tackle, Tampa Bay. He definitely hasn't played up to the same potential that he did when he was in Detroit. He was a beast for a long time, but he would get in trouble because he was very mean. He would do a lot of things. I think he's just one of these guys that once he lets his temper fly, he just plays like an animal. And I think trying to restrict that and play a little bit more in the confines of the rules has limited his ability to play like he did when he first was in the league. With that said, he's still a good player, and he still makes great plays. I think he's going to be a good player for Tampa Bay and replace Gerald McCoy. I don't know that he's going to completely replace him, but he is a good player nonetheless. I think they're going to feel this loss. C.J. Anderson, running back to Detroit. Again, they went and picked this Darrell Henderson up, and I think he's going to be a decent backup. But C.J. Anderson is a good backup as well. And I can't imagine that 2,231 rushing yards didn't have some of that from C.J. Anderson. Obviously, Todd Gurley is, him and Saquon Barkley are probably the two best running backs in the league. But I do think that they're going to feel these losses a little bit. I'm not sure that they added as much as they lost. And at 13-3, I just don't see them getting back to 13-3. I really don't. So maybe this is just gut instinct kind of a thing. There's nothing that really stands out to me as why I would feel that they would take a step back, except for, again, that they did lose some really key players. But I do ultimately think that they take a step back a little bit. They're not going to be as successful as they were, at least in my opinion. Now, for the first in the division, I have the Seattle Seahawks. They went 10-6 last year. They had 3,093 passing yards with seven interceptions thrown, 35 touchdowns, 3,842 allowed with 12 interceptions, 26 touchdowns. It's definitely not awful. 2,560 rushing yards with 15 touchdowns. I mean, it's a really good amount of rushing yards as a team. 18-11 allowed with 9 touchdowns, so they kept them out of the end zone, even though it's a fairly high number of rushing yards. It's kind of a bend but don't break defense. 43 sacks with 51 allowed, so obviously not the greatest offensive line there. But they have this quarterback, Russell Wilson, who just signed a long-term contract, very, very lucrative long-term contract, made a bunch of money this offseason. I'm not really the biggest fan of this idea. I got into discussion a little bit online about this where it's like, fine, this is the thing with Dax too, or Dak Prescott at Dallas. They pay these guys so much money that then they can't pay anybody else any money. And obviously, my quarterback, Andrew Luck, makes pretty good money. We've been lucky because we have a lot of good young players on our team. And I think that's the key, is if you can find a lot of good young players within their rookie contracts, I think that you can definitely be successful with a quarterback making that much money. But I do think it limits teams a little bit. Didn't mean to get into that very much, but I just wanted to express my opinion on that. I don't know. Again, not hating on these quarterbacks, and do I think Russell Wilson is worth the money? Yes. Do we look at his stats a little bit? 3,093 passing yards. You're kind of like, but he has a lot of rushing yards as well that he adds to that, and he's smart. 7 interceptions, 35 touchdowns. He knows how to manage the ball. I think he brings a lot of intangibles to the game. I'm a big fan of Russell Wilson. I really am. And I think Seattle at 10-6 maybe played a little under their capacity. Let's see what else they did here. In the draft, 29 overall, they got L.J. Collier, a defensive end out of TCU. I think he fits their need very well here. Defensive end, bringing him in. That was a good selection. Marquise Blair, safety out of Utah at 47. I guess he's a very versatile safety. And I like this. This is a team that had the Legion of Boom. They had such a great defensive backs for a long time. Was really like something you've never really seen, where the stars of the team was the defensive back group with Sherman and Earl Thomas and now I'm blanking on the rest of them. Chandler was just the most amazing setup that you've ever seen in defensive backs. They had a lot of success this way. Pete Carroll loves his defensive back core. I thought it was brilliant how he built that team. It was nice to watch. they have dissipated, gone separate ways. It's no longer the same defensive back group. So this is I personally think Marquise Blair is a good addition there. At 47, he's versatile. It'll be good to see how he plays. So number 64, DK Metcalf, wide receiver from Ole Miss. A lot of people are very high on DK Metcalf. I kind of feel like he might be fool's gold. I hate to say it. I'm not trying to hate on the guy. He's an absolute freak of nature as far as athleticism. The numbers that he put up at in the combine was absolutely ridiculous. So a lot of people were sold on him just based on those numbers. But when you really broke down his film, I kind of looked into the guy quite a bit because as a Colts fan, I was looking for like, who can we pick at wide receiver? What does this Metcalf guy bring? We obviously went with Paris Campbell. I'm not upset by that. But DK Metcalf, I think, might be a little bit of fool's gold. At 64, though, I don't know. I don't think it's that bad of a selection at the selection that they did. And a lot of people were so high on him. It was interesting because I thought that he was going to be one of these guys that could pick in like early first round, or not early first round, but late first round, early second round, and some team would have just reached a little too far for him. Picking him here at the selection that they did, late. I think that's the last in the second round. I think it was the very last pick in the second round. No, I'm not hating on it at all. It'll be interesting to see how he plays out. If he plays out, if he is as good as people think that he is, and he's not fool's gold, this could end up being a really good pick here, especially for such a talented quarterback that can accurately give him the ball where he needs to put it. So, and then 88 overall, Cody Burton, linebacker from Utah. I think this is just depth here. 120 overall, Gary Jennings Jr., wide receiver out of West Virginia, adding another wide receiver there. 124, Phil Hines, outside linebacker, Wake Forest. 132, I'm not sure I'll ever be able to say this name. Ugochukwu Amadi, safety out of Oregon. It's my Ducks alum, and I still can't say his name. I remember this guy seeing it and going, I'm not even going to attempt this. But he's a little bit small, but he's talented. I guess he's 5'9", 199 pounds. I think some of these Ducks players come into the league and don't play up to par. They play very well for the Ducks, but they're a little undersized and speedy kind of players. So it'll be interesting to see how it works out. Obviously, I'm always rooting for my Ducks alum, so I do hope that this guy ends up being a pretty good player for Seattle. But at 132, I don't think it's a terrible selection here. 142, we've got Ben Burr-Kirven, linebacker from Washington. Again, depth. 204, Travis Homer, running back out of Miami. Depth. And here in the later rounds, that's what you're going to get. 209, DeMarcus Krishners, I don't know. Defensive tackle, Florida State. I think that they needed more defensive tackles here. Maybe a little bit late for the need that they needed. Probably would have been good to try to focus on one of those higher up. But it's all about their depth chart and what they were going for. Number 236, John Ursia, wide receiver out of Hawaii. He's a little bit of a smaller wide receiver, I guess. But they obviously needed to add wide receiver. I think Doug Baldwin has been their number one target. And I think that he also is got some injury issues that they said could be long-term. So this was smart to go ahead and bolster that wide receiving core. We'll continue, but I do feel like they did a lot to add to their offense. Maybe should have went a little bit more on the defense. There was some issues there, but again, kind of a bend but don't break defense, so I don't think it's horrible. Free agency. Jason Myers, kicker from New York Jets. That's how you get a kicker, just so you guys know, through free agency. Don't waste a high draft pick. KJ Wright, outside linebacker, is a re-sign. Ezekiel Ansah, defensive end from Detroit. Mike Pupati, guard from Arizona. Al Woods, defensive tackle from Indy. I don't know anything about the guy, and I am a huge Indy fan, obviously. I can't imagine him being that great of a player. I don't know, but they added him. Nick Ballor, fullback from Detroit. Cassius Marsh, outside linebacker from San Francisco. Jamar Taylor, cornerback from Denver. Marcus Martin, guard from Dallas. They did add some linemen, which I think that they needed to. They did add some linemen here, and they did add a defensive end, Ezekiel Ansah from Detroit, which I don't think is bad. I definitely think that was good. That was good adding him on there. Like I said, the defensive tackle position I think is something that they needed to address, from what I understood, and I'm not sure that they did address that with picking up this guy at 209 from Florida State, and then picking up Al Woods from Indy. We didn't have the strongest defensive tackles in the world, anyways, and like I said, I don't know who the guy is. Shame on me for not knowing that. But anyways, their key losses. They lost Earl Thomas as a free safety to Baltimore. Again, this is part of that Legion of Boom, but he's a much older player, and I think he's a bit of a shell of himself. I'm not sure that he's still playing up to par that they need, and obviously they've had an issue there. Lost a whole bunch of players in that position, good players. So I don't know how much of a hurt that is. Justin Coleman, cornerback to Detroit, I do think that they'll fill that a little bit. I think he's a pretty good cornerback there. Shamar Stephen, defensive tackle to Minnesota. J.R. Sweezy, guard to Arizona. Mike Davis, running back to Chicago. I don't necessarily think any of those players take any kind of an impact away from the team at all. The last three. Overall, I think that they improved more than they lost. Adding those wide receivers, I think, are going to be end up being a good thing, especially if DK Metcalf can end up playing at that level that people think he can. I do feel like this team is going to get themselves back in the first place position over the Rams, though the competition is strong between the two, and I could have flip-flopped and went either way. I actually did change it several times. I had first on the Seahawks, and then I went back and put first on the Rams, and then I went back and put first on the Seahawks, and then I went back and put first on the Rams. Ultimately, I ended up with the Seahawks. I do think that they're close, and I wouldn't be surprised if either one of them wins the division. But there is parity in this league, and I think that this is one that's primed to have parity and make that selection change. I think with Russell Wilson getting that new contract, it takes kind of a load off of his shoulders, kind of shows him that the team supports him, and rightfully so. He definitely deserves it. He's a good quarterback and a guy who you can trust. He's not going to lose the game for you. He might not throw for 50 touchdowns in a season and over 5,000 yards, but he's a very good game manager, and he brings things to the team that a lot of quarterbacks don't. He's a very intelligent, very bright player. I like him a lot. So that's my pick for number one overall. Again, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I don't see the Cardinals improving that much. I really don't. In the future, sure they could. And if the guy can stay healthy down there, that they brought in, I do believe Kyler Murray. He will be a very good player eventually if he can stay healthy. I think that's going to be a big if because of his size. But eventually, yes. This year, no. I'm sorry, Cardinals fans. You guys are still at the bottom of the pack and probably the bottom of the league, period. San Francisco, they could actually improve quite a bit. I could see that. I just don't see them catching these other two. Again, it's a matter of, yeah, you got better as a team. You might be pretty good competition. But you've got two people that are just very good competition ahead of you, and I just don't see them breaking through that ceiling. So I do believe that the Rams take a step back. They lost some pretty good players, and, just like Kansas City went through this, they lost some good players, more in my opinion than the Rams. But it does affect teams. You've got a whole team chemistry. A lot of people like to look at just the quarterback or just the offense. There's questions with Todd Gurley. So I think that the Rams do take a step back, and I think Seattle jumps them. Thank you for watching. If you liked what you heard, give me a like, give me a subscribe. Here at 420 Colts Lane, we always take the high road, and I appreciate you giving me a shot here. I look forward to talking some more football with you in the future. Like I said, give me a like, give me a subscribe, comment below what your thoughts are, and thanks for joining me.